Joining us right now, he's been on hold, and we don't want to have him hold through even more of our pointless banter. I'm sure he is very, very busy this week. He writes college basketball for the Action Network. You can download the Action Network app or go to actionnetwork.com, and we'll ask him a little later in the program how you can participate and also get your brackets as smart as you can be. I promised you a little bit of help from the bullpen since Kyle and I don't watch a ton of college basketball. Eli Hershkovich joins us right now. Eli, my name is Dave. That's Kyle in the other room. How are you?
What's going on, guys? Thanks for having me on.
I want to make sure here. I put a very high priority on name pronunciation. Did I get Eli Hershkovich?
Hershkovich. So you got to have the H in there, but it was close enough, man. You were nearly spot on.
Okay, can I just say something?
Nearly spot on is the story of Dave's life.
You know, here's the thing. Okay, I'm not taking the fall for this. I'm not going to mention any names, but you got a guy that goes around, a guy I've known for a long, long time. Okay, that sends me the emails and says, "Hey, would you like to talk to this guy, that guy, whatever." I went over the pronunciation with him yesterday, and I quote, because I said, is it Hershkovich? I even, phonetically spelled it out. It was, here's my response from him, Vic, V-I-C-K, not Vitch, V-I-T-C-H. That's what I was told.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, how about that?
Wow, the rumors are going around, guys. Just to let you know, though, it is Vitch. So I will give you a pass on this one.
Okay.
Scandal at the Action Network.
Little bit. More on that later. I mean, that's where Ravel's at. All right, listen. The world is filled, especially this country, with people that are all of a sudden basketball experts, and they know everything about college basketball, even though they've watched 5 minutes all year long.
Me and Dave.
Kyle is one of those guys. I'm a Florida State guy. I've watched Florida State basketball, maybe 2 minutes of every other team. My first question to you is this. My strategy going in, Eli, and all the brackets is I'm not picking Duke. I'm not picking Duke because I feel like everyone is going to pick Duke. Would you agree with that type of strategy, or do you think I'm just way, way over my head?
No, I don't think you're off on that by any means. I mean, you look at the region they're in, and they have one of the tougher 2 seeds in March Madness in Michigan State. I thought Michigan State got snubbed. It seemed like the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee already made up their minds on who was going to be the 1 seeds, who were going to be the 2 seeds before Sunday's games were even played, because Houston loses in the AAC title game. They're still a number 3 seed. Not that I have a problem with that, but Michigan State sweeps Michigan, a fellow number 2 seed, and they're still a number 2 seed. So Duke doesn't have the easiest path to the Final Four, let alone the national title. You have Duke in that region. LSU, even though Will Wade won't be coaching the Tigers in the NCAA tournament, still a very athletic and a very talented LSU team in that East region. And Michigan State, to me, in my bracket, I have Michigan State knocking off Duke in the Elite Eight. Also Virginia Tech in the Sweet 16, a potential rematch from when Tech beat Duke without Zion, but granted, Virginia Tech was without Justin Robinson, their starting point guard. But to me, the Michigan State matchup comes down to big men. If Duke and Michigan State do indeed meet, and you think about for MSU, their athletic big, Xavier Tillman, who's become one of the better defensive bigs in college basketball after Nick Ward went down with a hairline fracture going back to a few weeks ago, and inserting him into the starting lineup has given Izzo a much more defensive presence in that front court, while Ward is a really good offensive player. Tillman is that much better defensively. And also Matt McQuaid, who, if you go back to earlier in the season, missed a good stretch in non-conference play, including a Louisville game, and Michigan State could rematch Louisville in the second round. But McQuaid against R.J. Barrett, to me, is a huge matchup, because R.J. Barrett is that much better with Zion back on the floor, a little bit more space around the perimeter and to attack the basket. But McQuaid is one of the better on-ball defenders. So you're not off by not taking Duke to win the national title by any means.
So we know every year a 16 seed beats a 1 seed. So that's
every year over the last year.
Right.
It's quite the stretch.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people say that this field is really top heavy. Do you agree with that?
I mean, throughout the Sweet 16 and into the Elite Eight, I can get on board with that. But there are some really good matchups to take advantage of. You guys are on the West Coast. UCI, Cal Irvine is an interesting team. They play Kansas State in the first round, and that's a Kansas State team without Dean Wade, who's one of the better offensive players. Barry Brown leads the team, point guard of Kansas State, in scoring. But the Wildcats' best big is Dean Wade, and he's been dealing with an injury. We'll see if he plays in that first-round matchup. But UCI has 9 or 10 guys, depth-wise, scoring-wise. They go 9 or 10 deep. I don't think any of those players average over 12 points per game. Really good defensively, top 50 in adjusted defensive efficiency on KenPom, which is a metric I love to use. It looks at how many points per possessions are you giving up over 100 possessions, so essentially over a game or so, and UCI has a ton of depth. I like them to challenge Kansas State and at least cover the 5.5. So there are some first-round matchups like that. When you get into the Elite Eight and into the Final Four, I'll give you guys a little tease. I have no number 1 seeds in my Final Four, but I do have 3 2s or 2 2s and a 3 and a 5. So I am top-heavy for the most part, but I would agree in the fact that once you get into the deeper parts of March Madness, you will start to see the elite teams separate themselves.
Eli Hershkovich, Action Network college basketball writer. You can download the Action Network app or go to actionnetwork.com. All right, so much stuff to get to here in so little time. Everyone looks at a 5-12. Everyone looks at a 5-12 and says, oh, 12 always upsets a 5. Interesting. I was looking at some stuff the other day in my cramming for these brackets and was finding that not as many people seem to be paying as much attention to the 6-11 as they do the 5-12, and maybe they should. Are there any 12s or any 11s that stand out to you when people are trying to get an edge on their bracket?
Well, I think you're spot on because you go back. So you're an NCAA tournament expert yourself.
Of course.
You go back to last season. 3 number 5s were able to beat the 12 seed. So it was 3 out of 4. The number 5 seed having the advantage. It's not like it happens every single year. The 6-11 usually happens more often when you go back to the last decade or so. And St. Mary's Villanova is a matchup that I love. St. Mary's beating Gonzaga in the West Coast Conference title game. If you're betting against the spread, that one's around 6 or 7, depending on where you shop around. And the Gales have one of the best defenses not talked about in college basketball, not talked about enough. 55th in adjusted defensive efficiency. They're really good on the glass. They're 12th in defensive rebounding percentage. And that's a smaller Villanova team, and also a team that doesn't rely on that much depth, while St. Mary's is the exact opposite. You go back to Villanova playing on Saturday in the Big East tournament title game, playing 3 games in 3 days. While that's not as many as a team that goes on a run in 4 or 5 days, it's still, they just played on Saturday. St. Mary's, their last game was on Monday, so last Monday against Gonzaga. So a lot more rest for the Gales, and you also look at three-point defense, a Villanova team that relies on their 3, but they haven't shot the 3 ball as well. You have Phil Booth, you have Eric Pascal, you have Connor Gillespie, but they shot around 30% over their last 9 games. St. Mary's has one of the best three-point defenses in college basketball, and while both teams want to slow down the pace, this is the key to a lot of these first-round matchups. Once you get deeper in the tournament, it becomes more about talent, but to get the upset, you have to control the pace. And I think St. Mary's, who has one of the slowest adjusted tempos in college basketball, so we're talking possessions per 40 minutes, they're going to be able to slow down Villanova by controlling the glass and defending the 3. And they also shoot a really high clip from deep, while Villanova has struggled to cover the 3 this season. So I like St. Mary's against the spread and on the money line.
Talking with Eli Hershkovich of the Action Network. Eli, something I'm always really guilty of when I'm selecting my brackets is I pick a player I really like and then just end up taking that player's team to go way too far. I think John Morant is going to be my guy this year. Is that crazy to think that Murray State can make a run? Or if it is, is there a team you're kind of eyeing as a possible Cinderella team this year?
No, I don't think it's crazy because of the matchups for Murray State in that West region. So if you look at their their first round matchup, not potential first round matchup, facing Marquette, the number 5 seed out of the Big East, Murray State at 12. I didn't like Murray State too much going in to March Madness before the brackets were revealed because you look at their 3-point shooting And if teams are going to collapse on John Morant, and granted this guy is going to be a top 3 pick, so uber talented, super athletic off the bounce, can shoot it a little bit from deep. But the rest of that team, we're talking about a below-average three-point shooting team. So if opponents collapse on John Morant, you have to be able to space the floor. Murray State doesn't do that too well. But if you look at their first couple matchups, facing Marquette in the first round, you have an opportunity to face a really good three-point shooting team in Marquette if they're on. Marcus Howard dealing with the wrist injury and dealing with a hand injury as well, and he shot terribly in that Big East tournament semifinal because of the injury. Yes, Marquette has three-point shooting around him, but the Rangers have one of the best three-point defenses in the country. We're talking top 5 in perimeter defense. So to me, this is more about defense for Murray State and creating transition opportunities, once again controlling the pace. Both of these teams want to push the tempo. I think Murray State's able to get the best of Marquette in this matchup. And then you have the potential Florida State, who you guys brought up earlier in Vermont, and then Gonzaga would be that Sweet 16 matchup. Florida State doesn't necessarily rely on the three ball as much as Vermont if Murray State does advance. But if Murray State is somehow able to get to that Sweet 16 game against the Bulldogs, I brought Gonzaga up earlier with St. Mary's. St. Mary's defended the three as well as anybody against Gonzaga this season. And if Murray State's able to get that Gonzaga matchup, they match up really well on defense and, again, able to leak out Morant in transition and control the tempo. So you're not crazy when you look at the matchups when it comes to Murray State.
Eli, when again, limited knowledge here, but when I look at the 4 regions and I'm looking at filling out my bracket, the one that is by far giving me the most difficulty is the South. There are a number of teams in there that I look at and go, and a lot of that is the stupidest way to think about it because they've burned me in the past. Obviously, Virginia last year, first number 1 seed ever to fall. They're back as a number 1 seed. And you mentioned Florida State. FSU just beat them a couple days ago in the ACC tournament. Tennessee, Villanova, last year's champion, but not as great this year. And you mentioned St. Mary's having the upset potential. And Purdue and Wisconsin seem like they trade spots every other year as being a team that everyone has out in the first round and they go to the Elite Eight, or vice versa. You have them in the Elite Eight and they're out in the first round. Is that South, should that be giving me as much trouble as it is, or do you think it's a clearer path?
No, I don't see it as a clear path because you have an Oregon team that, while I hate the Pac-12 overall, I mean, that conference was essentially a mid-major conference this year, but the selection committee, that's another gripe I have. They treated it like it was a high-major conference, which it technically is, but those are some rough teams in that conference. I know Arizona State beat Kansas at home, but they also lost to Princeton and Washington State at home. So I don't think the Sun Devils deserve to play in game. After the way Washington played in the Pac-12 title game, I don't think they deserve to be in March Madness either, to be frank, even though that 2-3 zone could give opponents fits in the NCAA tournament come Thursday and Friday and over the weekend. But you think about that South region, and Oregon has a shot to make a little bit of some noise. That Wisconsin matchup, though, is going to be interesting because the line shifted like 3 points as soon as it was released, which I was surprised about, favoring the Ducks. But the Badgers can shoot the three ball at a really high clip, too, even though that didn't happen against Michigan State. This team is an above-average three-point shooting team, top 3 in Big Ten play. Demetric Trice, Ethan Happ on the block, too, even though Oregon has a really good defensive front court after Bobo went down. So that Pac-12 matchup, while I do want to take Oregon on a bit of a run because I think they're hitting their stride at the right time, we're talking about a point guard in Peyton Pritchard that is 2 years removed from leading the Ducks on a Final Four run when they just merely lost to UNC in the Final Four, going back to 2016, when UNC won the title, mind you. That was a really good Ducks team with Jordan Bell. But you look at Tennessee, and I think they're the favorite in that South region. I do like Virginia. This is the best offense Tony Bennett has had from an adjusted offensive efficiency perspective. And again, that's on a possessions per or points per 100 possessions basis. But Tennessee, to me, while they have regressed defensively going back to last year, that was a top 10 adjusted D, their offense is off the charts compared to where they were last year. And you have Grant Williams, who is tremendous at getting to the line, drawing contact in the lane. Admiral Schofield has expanded his game from the perimeter this season. But Jordan Bone is the key to me in that region. because you need good point guard play to win in March. And I know Tennessee just got blitzed by Auburn on Sunday in the SEC title game, but Jordan Bone is one of the more underrated point guards in college basketball. He's refined his perimeter jump shot as well this season and really can control the pace. So while you have a legitimate big in Grant Williams, a National Player of the Year candidate, you have Admiral Schofield on the wing who can also take you down on the block, and a really good defensive big in Kyle Alexander. I see that top half of the South region as a bit more wide open because if, like you mentioned with Florida State and Virginia on Friday in the ACC tournament, if Virginia doesn't shoot the three ball well and a team is able to rebound the ball, if they have a tough matchup rebounding-wise, and if you face a team like Wisconsin or Oregon, that could very well happen, you're not going to be able to control the tempo, and that means you have to make your threes, and if you're not efficient offensively, you're done. As much as people love Tony Bennett, and I'm not saying you oust Virginia in the first round. There's no UMBC. Virginia's going to spank their first-round opponent this season. There's no doubt about that. But if you look later on in the bracket, if they're unable to control the pace, it's just a possession-by-possession game, and Virginia doesn't have the offense to come back in March Madness. We saw that last year again with UMBC. So to me, Tennessee's offense is good enough to get through this region. Purdue, Carson Edwards is going to shoot the Boilermakers out of the tournament just as quickly as he could shoot them back into a game. We're talking a guy that shoots just around 40% for the field, and he is explosive offensively. But you saw on Thursday or Friday against Minnesota, 7-24 from the field. He did the same thing the week before at Minnesota when the Golden Gophers essentially clinched an NCAA tournament berth. I agree with you. This is a tough region, but I'm sticking with Tennessee's offense.
Eli Hershkovich, Action Network, college basketball writer. You can go to actionnetwork.com, download the app. I imagine you guys will be very, very busy as we have about 30 seconds left over the next few days.
Yeah, it's going to be a blast. Betting previews galore. We also have our initial reactions to the against the spread once that came out on Sunday to our projected lines as well. Be sure to download the Action Network app. You could literally see the chances of your bet winning throughout the entire course of the game. You could also see where the money is going throughout the week leading up to the matchup. So the Action app is the place you need to be during and before March Madness tips off.
I've seen that live tracker in action. It's pretty awesome. Eli, I appreciate your time. I know you're busy, and good luck this year on the brackets.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it.
Take care. That's Eli Hershkovich of the Action Network.
You're listening to The Drive.